Welcome to episode 64 of the Epic Classroom Podcast. I'm Trevor Muir, and this is where we explore how to make learning meaningful, dynamic, and transformative. Epic, so students don't just get through school, they thrive because of it. All right, welcome back to the podcast. So happy to have you here. Before we get into this week's episode, I just want a little call to action, or maybe help if you have any help to give. I am actually working on a new book right now called The Portrait of a Graduate, or at least that's the tentative title. But what I'm really trying to explore is how do we help students develop the essential skills and competencies like communication and collaboration and critical thinking and creativity and empathy and problem solving? How do we help them develop these skills that we desperately need in our society when we think about what we want students to be like at the end of all of this, when they're done with their formal education and no longer under their formative guidance of educators and structures and systems in school? When that's all over with, what do we want them to be like? Because what they're like is largely going to determine what the rest of society is like. And so if we're not instructing and teaching and creating experiences to help develop those muscles, those essential competencies that students desperately need now and forever, that our society desperately needs, where are they going to develop them? So that's what I'm exploring, and that's what I'm working on, and I cannot wait to share it with you next spring. But right now I'm working on the critical thinking chapter about how do we help students develop critical thinking skills, because the Lord knows we need more critical thinking in society right now. I mean, I have been playing around with this new OpenAI tool called Sora, where you can just put in a simple prompt and it can create a video that looks indiscernible from real life. Like, it's kind of last night, and I might be a little late to the game, but I just got invited to use it last night. And so I'm playing around with it, and what it can do is just mind blowing. I took a picture of this thing of lettuce sitting on my counter at home, and I just put in the prompt, have a grizzly bear walk around the corner in my kitchen and start eating it, and then look at the camera and say, man, this lettuce is good. So that's what the prompt was, and I put it in, and I'm telling you, it looks exactly like a grizzly bear is walking into my kitchen and eating romaine lettuce on my counter. It's not like it just comes up with a fake counter or one that looks like a cartoon or anything. No, it is my counter, except now there's a grizzly bear in it, and they're eating. And I'm like, wait, what is going on? And it's like, man, it's entertaining and funny, but then also like, what are the implications of this? Right? Like, how is this going to be abused? How are people going to have their ideas shifted and be persuaded and sold and emoted, all of the different things that power corrupts and people with power can do and that media can do? How is this going to be used? And how is it already being used in that way? And it's like, man, we need critical thinkers. We need students and adults, for crying out loud. We need people who can look at media and can look at information and determine whether it's worth our time or not, or whether it's real or not, or true or not, or how do I decide what to use and what to discard? I mean, that is such a critical skill. And that's not what this whole podcast episode's about, but it's what I've been putting a lot of time and thought into. And I'm curious if you are listening to this right now and you're an educator or a parent, because this book is also going to be for parents, because I know it's not all on schools to develop the essential competencies in our young people. It takes all of us. It takes communities. It takes all of us. But so whoever you are listening right now, do you have any special way that you help develop critical thinking in students or in your own child? Like, do you have a technique or a lesson or a unit or a project or even just a practice that's really about flexing this muscle, helping your student or your child get better and better at critical thinking and understanding what's good and what's not, what's useful and what's not, what's valuable and what's invaluable, what's destructive? So if you have that, I would love to hear from you. And I would also love to hear about it, and if I feel like it would be something that fits with what I'm writing and doing lots and lots of work on, of course I will attribute you and quote you. But I would just love to hear what you're doing. I think it's really, really important that we're sharing our ideas right now. If something that's working for you, if you're doing something that's working for your students, maybe it would work for other people's students or other people's children. And so if you have anything that you would be willing to share, please shoot me a quick email, just trevor@trevormuir.com. And I'll set something up, or we'll figure that out. But I would just love to hear from you. So that's my little call to action. If you have anything that you do specifically on critical thinking, shoot me an email at trevor@trevormuir.com. I'll also put a link to my email in the show notes of this podcast so you can get in touch with me if you feel like it. And if you don't feel like doing that, well, let's just get into the podcast episode. All right. So the other day, I asked actually this was just yesterday. It's fresh on my mind. Yesterday, I asked my 4th grade daughter, Piper, what her favorite part of school was that day. And you can guess what her usual answer to that question is, because it seems universal. Usually Pipey says, oh, my favorite thing at school was recess. Or sometimes it's lunch. And every now and then it's gym or art class, but it's usually recess. But yesterday, I took her for a little walk after school in the woods behind her house. And we're walking barefoot through the woods. And I said, what was your favorite thing at school today, Pipe? And she said it was reading class, which is nice to hear as an English teacher and reader myself. And I said, well, why was it reading class, Pipe? And she said, well, my teacher called me over to read to him one-on-one. I was like, oh, cool. That's called reading conferences in the English pedagogical world. But anyway, she said, he called me over to read with just him. And I said, why did you like it so much? And she said, well, when I got to a really hard word that I was reading, I stopped and I took my time to spell it out. And I thought that was a problem, that I wasn't reading fast enough. But then my teacher actually said that he really liked when I did that. And then she said, when I was reading a page I didn't understand, I went back to the top and I started that page over. And Mr. Phillips said he was really proud of me for doing that. And that's a really good strategy. And so as a longtime English teacher, right, hearing my daughter share a positive experience from language arts class was music to my ears. Because what happened is her teacher had noticed something real about her effort, and he made the time to tell her. You know, what struck me wasn't just that Piper felt affirmed by him, which, by the way, anytime someone wants to affirm my children, it just fills my heart. Of course, as a parent, I love that when she's feeling encouraged. But there's also this reality that this 5-minute reading conference captured what great teaching looks like. It's slowing down, it's seeing the individual, and it's naming the process of learning, not just the product. It's not just praising like, oh, look how fluent or fast you're reading. It's naming the process, right? Like that's what sticks with us. That's what we can build off of. You know, and in that brief conversation, Piper's teacher helped her internalize what good readers do. You know, he didn't just tell Piper she was a strong student. He showed her how to be one. He was affirming what she was doing good here. And for this to really set in, he had to work with her one-on-one, right? That kind of intentional one-on-one instruction can do more to build confidence and competence than a week's worth of worksheets. It's how students learn to see themselves as learners. And like, this isn't anything new, but I just got to say real quick, I love her teacher for this. Like, well, I just love that he cuts out time to do this. I love that she felt seen, that she's growing as a reader. You know, when she got her state reading scores back recently from their standardized test, I love that she's doing really strong reading right now, because the teachers for the last 5 years of her life are really strong educators, and she's also being supported at home, and she's becoming the type of reader that's going to do it for life, not just in school. I love that. And I love that a lot of this reading skill that she has come from one-on-one instruction. It's come from her parents, like her mom and dad, reading to her every single night, right? She doesn't go to bed without being read to at night. But then she goes to school and gets this type of one-on-one instruction as well. Not all the time, and we're going to talk about that. Not all the time, but sometimes. Sometimes she's called over to his desk, and they sit down and she reads to him. And teachers have known for generations that there's power and slowing down to work individually with students. When a teacher sits beside a student and gives targeted feedback, it communicates, hey, I see you, I'm with you, and your learning matters. That moment of connection makes students feel more receptive to guidance, and it transforms feedback from criticism into collaboration, right? It's creating that human connection, and it deepens the learning experience. It makes it more effective. And I think we all know this, right? But research even backs this up. If you've ever looked into John Hattie's meta-analysis on effective teaching, it shows that individualized feedback has one of the highest impacts on student achievement, right? It's the human connection at play here, but also the personalized teaching of it here. It's the fact that feedback Mr. Phillips, her teacher, was giving her was just for her. It was specifically about her skills and her growth and a reaction to her ability here, right? And then this also just fits in with Vygotski's theory of zone of proximal development. It shows that learners make the greatest gains when they get just enough guidance to bridge the gap between what they can do alone and what they can do with support. Piper's teacher created classroom space for her to get this guidance, which as her dad, but also as an English educator, I could see how this had an effect on her gains in a language arts classroom, right? I could see the development of it really, really clearly. Piper's teacher was doing all of this intuitively by recognizing and affirming the strategies Piper used to overcome difficulty. He wasn't just teaching reading, right? He was teaching self-efficacy. He was reinforcing the belief that growth happens through struggle and reflection. Right? That's some Portrait of a Graduate stuff. That's something that transcends beyond fourth grade reading class into the whole human life. But knowing that, when I work through struggle and I slow down and I don't get frustrated and I grit through it, I become better. Right? I love that. Now, you knew this was coming. Before we go any further on personalized instruction, before we talk more about the value and maybe some strategies for one-on-one instruction, I think we need to name something. Every teacher knows the hard truth. If you're working one-on-one with a student, there's 24 other students waiting for you to do something, right? When you turn your back on the rest of the class to work with one student, who knows what's going on behind you, right? Individualized instruction sounds beautiful in theory, but it can feel impossible to practice, especially when you've got a really heavy course load, when you have a lot of students, right? When you have multiple preps that you're teaching and different content swirling around, and when you've got different distractions, and when you have cell phones that exist and technology that exists, and fill in the blank, right? How do you give every student those powerful moments of attention and intention when your classroom is full and your time is limited and you're juggling many different curriculum demands? Right? This is the central challenge of teaching in general, right? We all want to personalize learning, but we're also managing complexity at scale. The question isn't whether individual instruction is valuable, because I can't think of anybody who could tell me it's not, right? It's about how do you make it possible? So I want to explore that a little bit with you, but I also just want to recognize that reality and that difficulty. To start, I think, though, is this is where thoughtful classroom design matters. The goal isn't to conference with every student every day, even though in a perfect world that would be great. But let's be realistic, that might not always be possible. So instead, what if we just built in a rhythm and structure that makes those moments more realistic, right? What if we created possibilities to do it more often, realizing how absolutely crucial it is for student growth? And one approach to this to make it possible and more realistic is doing rotating conferences. Just as reading and writing workshop models allow for short, targeted check-ins, teachers can set up a predictable schedule where students know when their conference time is coming. They know, yep, I am going to meet with my teacher on Wednesday. And this helps students take ownership of their independent work, and it keeps class moving even while their teachers engage with one learner. When they know, oh yeah, I'm going to get that time. And so when I'm not in that time, I have to work a little bit better, right? Having this rotating conference schedule. And I think even putting it up on the board and letting students know, hey, here's when you can expect yours to come up. It's going to happen. And so do the work so that you're ready for our time together. But then also when I'm with other people, I have an expectation that you're going to be working because you know how valuable this time is. You know how much you enjoy getting that instruction. And so we have to create space for it. My friend, Sherry Steelman, who has been teaching well over 50 years now, she's been on this podcast before. If you haven't heard that podcast yet, go back. It's one of the crowd favorites. But I was talking to Sherry. That woman, she retired after 50 years of public school English teaching. And now she's working full-time at a university teaching writing instruction to college students there because she just can't hang it up. And because she just loves it so much. And she was telling me, I was like, so what are your students really loving? And she's like, their favorite thing is when I create time to work with them one-on-one to do their writing instruction with them. And so she does these writing conferences with every single one of her students. And in college, she's able to create office hours for this. But she does this writing instruction. It's a required part of her course. And she says her students love it. She says that it's their very favorite part of what she does. Not the tier one, it's the individual stuff. It's like, yeah, this stuff is universal. And her students know that it's coming. And so she has them prepare for these, like, hey, come up with any questions you have for me, because this is going to be time for me to really get to spend time answering them or discussing them with you. So do that kind of preparation. She even can require that they prepare for it. Hey, you need to have at least 3 questions that you have for me when you come, or make sure that you do this piece of writing before you come to me. Otherwise, we're not going to have anything to talk about. So it creates a little bit of a level of accountability because there's these rotating conferences, because students know they're coming. And so maybe you could build that in. But then I think, and I talk about small group instruction with educators a lot in different places. One of the things I talk about is a strategy to design more one-on-one small group instruction or individual instruction is really not just about your strategy of working with the small groups or working one-on-one with students. It's about what you do with everybody else. Right? Because that's the big concern. If I'm not able to work with all of my other students, if I'm not able to manage them and make sure that they're staying on task and make sure that they're not misbehaving, if I'm not doing that, it's going to be chaos when I'm working one-on-one, and therefore it's not going to be helpful for anybody in the room, including the student I'm trying to work individually with. And so I think what we really need to talk about to make more of this possible is, what do you do with the other 24 students? Or 29 students, or however many students you have. This is why this is one of the many reasons I'm such a proponent for project-based learning, right? It's one of the most effective ways to do this. When students are working on authentic, collaborative projects, right? Projects that mean something to them, right? They're engaged in problem solving. It's authentic. It's purposeful. There's this motivator that's beyond just doing well in school. It's about solving a problem that matters. When they're doing this, but then it's also collaborative, they're working with other people, it requires less of teacher input, right? Teachers have more space to work with one-on-one students or move around the room and pull individual students aside for focused conferences without disrupting the rest of the class, because the rest of the class is engaged. For example, during a science project where students are designing solutions to reduce plastic waste in their school, the teacher might meet one-on-one with a student who's struggling to organize research. That 5-minute conference can clarify a misconception they're having, or introduce a strategy, or simply remind the student that their thinking matters, building some of that confidence. But then meanwhile, the rest of the class can continue to explore and create, because there's things to create, there's things to do, and hold each other accountable and learn together. You can have different structures to help them do this. I have a whole collaborative classroom toolkit on my website. It's free, where you can just go. I think it's trevormuir.com/collaborative-toolkit. I'll put it in the show notes as well. But where students can learn to manage themselves. They have logs where they have tasks lists, and they have a contract where they help hold each other accountable with it, and some type of accountability process. There's a culture that you can build where students are better at working together and learning to hold each other accountable, so the teacher isn't having to do that. When you create structures and space like this to happen, these structures where students are managing themselves more and they're doing work that matters to them, it's not just about classroom management. It's about making room for you to be able, well, I guess it is about classroom management, but you're not having to do all of the managing, right? It's about students being able to do some of that. And that creates space for you to work more one-on-one with students. That's the main idea here, right? Like that. So we've got to be able to explore how to do that more. And listen, I'm not naive. It's easier said than done, but it's worth the time to do it. And speaking of time, like that's the other piece that often gets in the way of doing one-on-one instruction. It's like, I ain't got time for that. I want to have time for that. I'd love to have more time for that, but there's a lot of other things I have to do, and simply just not enough to be able to work one-on-one with a student or work in small groups with students, if that's more realistic, which, by the way, that's another strategy. Of course, one-on-one is excellent, but let's say you're teaching secondary and you've got 35 students in your room. That can be really difficult to do. Well, what if it's 1-on-3 or 1-on-4? Right? Small groups of students to where you can still be more individual, maybe not as personalized as one-on-one, but you know what? I still think the more you can reduce that ratio, the stronger, the more effective the learning experience can be. And so working with smaller groups is just another way to make this more possible. But then also with time, I think this is where AI, artificial intelligence, can have some really strong positive impacts on teaching. Of course, there's a lot of trouble that it creates, and we've talked about it before, and we will keep on talking about it. But while nothing replaces a teacher sitting beside a student, what AI can do is make those one-on-one moments possible more often. Listen, AI tools can handle some of these routine tasks that take a lot of time for you to do, right? It can generate leveled reading passages. It can organize small group plans. It can help you create a schedule. It can offer instant formative feedback on things that don't necessarily require really personalized feedback, but it's just giving feedback that students can use that you would normally have to sit down and do, instead of you going through and identifying every time students used a verb incorrectly or a comma incorrectly or missed a part on a math equation or whatever it is. AI can do that for you. It can give that formative feedback, or it can help you with lesson planning and unit planning, these things that take a lot of time. Now, all of a sudden, AI can do a lot of that work for you. It can save you hours and hours each week, and it can save you class time. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of times in class when students are doing individual work, that's when you're catching up on some of the things you need to catch up on. And I bet you wish you didn't have to do that, but if you don't do it in class sometimes, it becomes your planning period, but then you're not actually getting to plan. Or it becomes your life at home, and then you're not getting life at home. But now all of a sudden we have these tools like ChatGPT and Gemini and Powers and Magic School. I mean, there's so many different ones that you can use that can take some of these rote tasks away from you. And then all of a sudden you are having more space to do the work that you really want to do, right? Even adaptive learning platforms that give students personalized practice allow teachers to step away from managing every detail, and now you can focus on the human side of teaching, which is listening and questioning and guiding and storytelling, the things that you want to do, working with individual students, right? AI shouldn't replace the conference. It should create the space for it, right? AI shouldn't replace one-on-one instruction. It should create space for you to have more one-on-one instruction. When used thoughtfully, it becomes a kind of invisible partner, taking care of the mechanical parts of teaching so that you can spend more time on the relational ones. That's where the deepest learning happens, right? When Piper told me about her reading conference, it wasn't the praise that mattered most. It was that her teacher noticed, that he took time to sit down and talk about how she learns, not just what she got right or wrong. And that single moment made my daughter feel seen and capable. It built her confidence as a reader, but also as a thinker. And when multiplied across a classroom, those small intentional moments can transform a culture of compliance into one of growth. Listen, teachers can't do it all, and they shouldn't have to. Administrators and school systems need to design schedules and class sizes and professional development that make one-on-one instruction more possible. Because when teachers have the time and structure to connect with individual students, the results ripple far beyond academics. And that's how a simple reading conference becomes something much bigger. It's a small window in what education can be when students are known and guided and believed in. It's also what made my little girl Pipey like reading be her favorite part of the school day instead of recess that day. So there you go, folks. That is it for this week's podcast. Thanks for listening in. If you like this If you like this podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to tag me on social media, on Instagram or Facebook or X or YouTube. You can find me easily at the Epic Classroom or type it in Trevor Muir. You'll find me. If you'd like to read any of my books, those are all on Amazon, and you can check out my website at trevormuir.com. And again, if you would like to give some input on what's working for you as far as critical thinking instruction goes, please get in touch at trevor@trevormuir.com. Or if you'd like me to talk about any of the things I talk about with your teachers, if you're somebody who handles that kind of PD or speaking or whatever it is, feel free to get in touch at that same email. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to episode 64 of the Epic Classroom Podcast. I'll talk to you next time.